Welcome to Drinks in the Library, the only library where drinks aren't just allowed, they are required. I'm your librarian host, Gigi Howard, and each episode I'll be interviewing a guest about a much-loved book that we will be pairing with a drink for you to enjoy along with us or consider for your next book club meetup. As always, stay curious and support your local library. Hello, Libration Nation. This week we are discussing the fantasy young adult classic Percy Jackson and the Olympians by Riordan. And I'm so excited. My guest this week is Madison Schmidt. And Madison is a lover of history that hosts the History Podcast. It's a history podcast. It covers all things history. When she is not working on researching, recording, or editing, she has her nose in a book. And so currently she's immersed in the romantasy series, A Court of Thorns and Roses, and also, of course, Fourth Wing. Madison's love for fantasy started with this Percy Jackson and the Olympian series. Having read the series all in one go, Madison has reread these a number of times now, and they were an important part of her finding her love for fantasy as well as furthering her love for rereading books. So much fun to talk with another podcaster, again, from another area of the country. Also, our drink this week is a Blue Hawaii. You'll find out Percy Jackson has some water background in him. There's also a little bit of an obsession with all things blue. So that is the perfect drink for this week's episode. And I hope you love it. Here we go. So hang on, I didn't ask you, where are you in Florida?
Tampa area.
Tampa, okay. Did you guys get all the snow?
No, so we're like in the middle slice of Florida. The snow only really went down to like the panhandle and just a little less, like a little down on the panhandle. Not down here. It's just been very cold for Florida. In the 30s in the morning and then like the 50s in the afternoon. But it's like a wet cold, so it's like it just gets into your bones.
Yeah, it's been very cold. Hopefully it's going to start warming up here soon. Okay, so I'm super excited because we're talking about Percy Jackson. Now, did you want to start with The Lightning Thief? Are we going to cover the whole series? What do you think?
I feel like we can do the whole series, the Percy Jackson series, like the first one, and then the Heroes of Olympus series, the second one, because there's a through line between them. And they are, I don't know, they're just something that I've read each of them multiple times.
Yeah, so you've read both of them?
Yes, I've read them probably both series collectively at least 5 times all the way through for both of them.
Big fan.
Yes.
All right. I guess my first question is always, who were you when you picked up this series?
I was in 5th grade when I started reading the Percy Jackson series. My grandma, before she retired, she taught middle school. So she saw that it was a book that a bunch of the kids were reading. And by that time, I think all of the first series had been published. So she got me all of them and I read them straight through. My little brother read them. We're 2 years apart. And I devoured them. They're one of the first book series that I have like actual memories of like being obsessed with. Because I've always been a reader, but this was the first series where I was like fangirling over a book series that kind of got me into more of the fantasy aspect of reading, and not just like elementary school, like YA little chapter books. Like this was like my stepping stone into the little bit older YA books that gets you into the Twilights, the Divergents, the Harry Potters. That was like my stepping stone.
Okay. All right. For the listeners that have never read Percy Jackson, and just so you know, I read The Lightning Thief. I've read that one, but it's probably been like 10 years. Mm-hmm. All right. Start us off. Who is Percy?
Percy, when the series starts, he's 11. He's in middle school and he's had a troubled childhood. He's on like his 6th school in 6 years. Like he keeps getting expelled because things just keep happening to him and he gets in trouble for them. Turns out he is a half-blood or a demigod. His dad is Poseidon. And because he's a son of the big 3, he is like monsters are more attracted to his smell, he gets into more trouble. And then the first book just goes through him. He gets a quest from the Oracle, and he goes with Annabeth and Grover, and it's trying to find Zeus's lightning bolt because it has been stolen, and they think that he stole it. It's just him trying to clear his name, but also find the lightning bolt. And I reread it recently just so I could have it in my brain, and it is definitely perfect for that middle grade reader. Like, it is that perfect getting you into chapter books that are the more substantial kind of. It's over 300 pages long. I didn't remember it being that long when I read it when I was in elementary
That's a
school.
lot for a middle grade.
Yes, I was 300 pages. I was I don't remember it being this long.
So basically, it sounds like they think that Percy stole the lightning bolt.
Yes.
He was framed.
Yes.
And going into it, how does he meet Annabeth and Grover?
Grover is, I'm going to butcher all of these names because I say them in my head. He's a satyr, and he's known as a keeper. So he is tasked to go to middle schools because in the lore, the satyrs, they age half as fast as humans. So they can stay in that middle grade appearance for longer. And he can tell that Percy has something going on with him. So he meets him at his last school, and he looks out for monsters and protects him and Chiron, the centaur. He also goes to the school that Percy's at because he also is something's going on with this kid. He's more important than one of the regular demigods. And Annabeth is already at the camp. She's been at the camp for 5 years. She ran away from home when she was 7, across the country, from California, because the camp is located in Long Island. So quite the distance for a 7-year-old to be traveling, but she got there.
What is a satyr?
It's half human, half goat. Goat on the bottom, human on top.
Okay. And he doesn't look like a satyr to humans, though.
No, because in this series, there's this thing called the mist that it's so when regular mortals are looking, they see what they want to see. They don't see the monsters, the things that aren't normal. They just glaze over it.
Okay. In Sixth Sense, how they don't really notice that they're seeing dead people.
Yes.
But they are. They're just not big.
Or in Harry Potter, how they make that spell. So people just wander away. They forget what they were doing.
Yes. So does he know who his parent is? Did we cover that yet?
No. In the book, when the Half-Bloods get to the camp, they are considered undetermined. They are they're not claimed by a parent. And they all get dumped into the Hermes cabin because he's the one who has the most children. So they're just, for now, you can go into the Hermes cabin. And then when you get claimed, you can go to your own cabin. But he does get claimed not as soon as he gets to the camp. It's a week or two until he's in the camp. They're in the middle of a capture the flag game. And then that's when Poseidon decides to claim Percy as his. And then he goes to his own cabin. But when they get there, they don't know who their godly parent is. They just know they've had some monster-esque experiences, and this is the safe place.
Yes. And then they know that he's one of the big three. That's while everybody's following him around. Who are the big three? What's the big deal about them?
In the book series, the big three are Hades, Poseidon, and Zeus. And after World War II, they made a pact not to have any more children because their children are the most powerful children. But all three of them did a very poor job of doing that because in this first book series and the second book series, there are children from all the big three that are involved in.
They didn't keep their word.
They did not keep their word, but they end up being the most powerful, and it attracts more monsters and can lead to more war. So they decide not to have any more children. Because in the book, I can't remember exactly what sides they fell on, but it was World War II was a war between Zeus and Poseidon, or Hades. It was a war between them. That was how they explained World War II. And then after that, they decided that no more kids.
Okay. But then they didn't stick to it, so they all have children now.
Yes.
Albeit probably less.
Yes, they do have less. Because in the book, in the Hermes cabin, there's bunch of sets of bunk beds, but then there's people sleeping on sleeping bags, just on the floor. It's just overcrowded. But Percy is just one, and then Zeus has one, and then Hades ends up having 2, which is a little bit later in the book series.
Okay. Do they get into how Poseidon gets with Percy's mom. What's that whole dynamic like?
Not really. Probably because it is such like a younger grade book. They probably don't get into it too much.
There's not like a romance aspect.
There's only so much that they can say. In the book, it's explained as a summer by the beach, and that's when she met Percy's dad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like Grease.
Yeah.
Summer lovin'.
Yes, it was just a summer romance, and then Percy happened, and that's how they explain that. Rick doesn't go too much more into how that happens.
Oh my God. So talking about Rick a little bit, what do you know? And I have to tell you, his name is Rick Riordan.
Yes.
That's how you pronounce it. I'm a librarian, and I've been a librarian for a hot minute. So I was a librarian back in the day when these stories, probably when you were reading them. And I always called it Rick Riordan.
That's how I said it until I recently heard it the right way. It was probably like a year ago. It's like, oh God, I've been saying this poor man's name the wrong way.
So if anything else, this is the PSA for anyone else out there. It's Rick Riordan. So sorry, Rick, but I did get your book into the hands of a lot of children.
Yes. I even think now it's still a good book for kids to start reading. There's a couple of references in there that are a little dated, but for the most part, I think you could give this to any 9, 10, 11-year-old and they would probably enjoy it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I wanted to ask you too, were you into mythology at all when you were a kid?
Surprisingly, no. This did not. I know a lot of kids who really were obsessed with this book. They got really into the Greek mythology part of it. But if anything, this book just made me want to read more fantasy style books. It got me more into books than into mythology.
Okay. Because I was thinking I would have loved this series when I was a kid. I was obsessed with mythology. I was the only kid. I forget whenever they give you that Edith Hamilton classic myth books. Because it was like, I felt like it was like a soap opera.
Yes.
And it really is. If anyone's never gotten into mythology, these people are murdering each other. They're sleeping with each other. And it's just all over the place.
Now that I'm a little bit older, I like the mythology a little bit more. I do listen to a podcast called Let's Talk About Myths, Baby, and she goes over, she has quite a backlog now of many myths and stories from ancient Greece and Rome. And now I appreciate them a little bit more. But when I was like in middle school, I was more interested in that story itself and not really the other stories that I came from.
Yeah. I wonder if this, because I don't know if kids are as into mythology or as forced to read it as much as I was, but I wonder if it's like doing the opposite of maybe people read Percy Jackson first and then they get into mythology later a little bit. So anyway, and I wanted to pause real quick. So you picked out our drink.
Yeah.
All right. So it's a Blue Hawaii. And do you want to tell us the reason behind it?
So in the book, Percy, his mom works for a little candy counter, and his stepdad, Smelly Gabe, he's a little backstory on that first. Sally married Gabe because he smells so bad that his smell overrides the smell of Percy smelling of demigod. So she's put up with this terrible man so that Percy is not attacked by monsters. But Smelly Gabe, claimed that you couldn't have there weren't any blue foods. So Sally decided upon herself to make as many blue foods as possible. And she makes these blue chocolate chip cookies. So I'm like, so something blue. And he's also got like the water aspect with him. So I'm like, something beachy. I think that would fit.
Very Hawaii. And it's great for a nice little Friday night. Who else? Are there any other characters in this story that we should talk about, or plot lines that really drew you in, or also in the second book as well?
I will say, so the first book series is kind of in the same realm as Harry Potter, like how the books like age with the characters. This book series also ages with the characters because Percy goes from 11, I think at the end he's 16. So it's like one book per year. And then the follow-up series is the same characters. It's just chronologically the next thing in line. And one of the plots in the second series is Percy has amnesia and he can't remember who he is. And part of the first book is you're getting all these new characters, and at the end of the very first chapter or second chapter, it's right in the beginning of the book, I can't remember exact, because I was reading it, I was like, I don't know if I want to dive into another book series that it's like all these new characters. They end up at Camp Half-Blood, and at this point they're older. Percy and Annabeth have gotten together, their boyfriend and girlfriend, and Annabeth is like, well, we have to, she's like, who are you and what do you know about Percy Jackson? And then me and my brother and everyone else who I knew who was reading this book was like, and that's when we decided to keep reading this book, because he went missing and they have to find him. And it's a retelling of the Odyssey, the second book series, in a more digestible way than reading the Odyssey itself.
Which is not very digestible. Like,
No.
Let's be honest.
No.
And did we cover, who is Annabeth's parent?
Athena, her mom is Athena.
Okay. Athena and Poseidon. I guess the gods don't really care that they're cousins.
Yeah, they don't really acknowledge, they just gloss over that part. They're like, as long as your like mortal parent is not of the same relation.
It's fine.
And it's fine. So not Athena, Annabeth couldn't be with someone else who is also in Athena's cabin. Like that would be wrong. But any of the other gods' children are fine. They're fair game.
Okay, good. Who's your favorite character?
It probably is Annabeth. I was a very booky, nerdy person when I was in middle school, high school, and I really connected with her because she is just, being a daughter of Athena, she's very smart and she's very into books, and the ways that she thinks of things are very logical. And I really her character stuck with me, which is probably one of the reasons why I've read this book so many times. I should send you a picture. I have my very first copy of this book. I've read it so many times. My brother has read it so many times that the cover has fallen off. It's been loved so much that the little paperback, it just couldn't hold on anymore. I'll have to send you a picture.
Yeah, definitely.
A well-loved original Lightning Thief copy. Oh God, it's been probably like 8 different backpacks at this point.
Aw. I wanted to ask you, did you and your brother go see the movies?
Yes. So they came out, I feel pretty certain, the same year that I was in 5th grade. So I was reading it, and it was also like a cultural moment of being a 10-year-old. I remember going to see it in theaters, and in the movies, they only made 2 movies, which I think they dropped the ball. They could have definitely made this into like a Harry Potter-esque type
They only
series.
made 2?
They only did 2 movies. Part of the thing was they aged up the characters. So in the movie, Percy is not 11. He starts off, I believe he's 16 in the movies, which was probably easier for a movie aspect because in the book, they're doing a lot of traveling. So Annabeth and Percy are like 11 and 12 years old, and then Grover is a satyr who is, I think he's 28, but he's got, I don't know, they all look like they're like preteens.
But Grover ages half the time, so he looks like, what, 13, 14?
Yeah, so he probably looks like he's about 14, like 13, 14. Mm-hmm. So I can see from a movie perspective, it would probably be a little bit unbelievable having 11-year-olds crossing the entire country on their own accord. And I think it made it easier for that. But then I think it made it harder to scale the movies up to keep up the plot lines.
Yeah.
But I did watch the TV show, the one that just came out last year.
I didn't know there was one.
Yeah, it's on Disney Plus.
Okay.
Because the books are published through, I think it's Hyperion, the publishing, which is through Disney. And they did a pretty faithful adaptation of the first book for season 1, and they're making a season 2, so I hope they continue on with it.
Okay, because I'm getting the vibe you are not a huge fan of the movies, or were you?
I was actually a fan of the movies. They are very different from the books, but I did enjoy the movies. They are not the same, but I enjoy them both in their own ways.
Who is so you read this with your brother, like,
yes.
What does he think? What's his takeaway?
Does
he want us to say his name? Keep my name out of your mouth, this podcast.
I'm not sure what he feels about the movie. I will say that he did, because we were reading the Heroes of Olympus series at the same time, and he got his hands on I think it's the 3rd book before I did, and he told me the ending before I read it. I held a grudge on him for a very long time after that.
Oh my God.
I was like, how dare you?
Oh my gosh. I can't believe your relationship survived. That is betrayal.
It was. I mean, we were like 12, 13, 14 when this was happening. So, preteen angst.
Wow. You know what? You got to call him out on this podcast. So
Yes,
you've got your revenge.
I'll be sure to let him know. I'll be like, listen through about halfway mark. I talk about you.
But he's also enjoyed it. So what's the kind of the vibe of this story? Is it serious? Is it fun? Is it scary?
I don't think it's scary. I know there are some parts that maybe might be a little thrilling, but I think it's a little bit more serious than you would think it would be for like a kid's book series. It does tackle like a lot of like serious topics like war. It's a lot of war. We're fighting people with swords. We're killing monsters. But there is fun in it because they are, 11, 12, 13 years old. So they have lots of little quips in there. I had a fun time reading it, but there is definitely that serious fate of the world kind of hangs on my shoulders as a teenager thing that YA novels like to do.
It's poor kids. The whole world is riding on me to save them all, and they don't even know.
Yes.
Oh, we got into it a little bit, but Rick Riordan, do you know anything about him? What's he like?
I don't know too much about him, but I do know that some of the backstory for the books is that he wrote them for his son, who I believe has ADHD and dyslexia, and he wanted to give him representation in a book that these things aren't something that would be like a hindrance or something that can be an advantage for someone. And that's part of the lore of the books is that the demigods have ADHD because they're like wired for battle. Like that's how their brain thinks. And they have dyslexia because they are predestined to be able to read like ancient Greek. Like it's just something in their brains, which is why reading like English text is hard for them. Trying to have representation, but probably if he wrote it now, it would be represented maybe a little differently. I think the first book was published in 2005. But for 2005, I don't remember reading many books from that time period that had that similar type of thing going on.
Yeah, and I often think that I have someone in my family who has ADHD, and I often think about it as, why do we make ADHD like a negative thing? Like it's just people who think a little bit differently. I like that he turned that in kind of a superpower because sometimes I feel like it is a superpower, but it's just these kids are asked to learn in an environment where it's not appreciated, that we make it out to be a negative thing when a lot of those people are creatives, are, people who are out doing all kinds of things, thinking outside the box, and we need those kinds of people.
Yes. And he doesn't just like mention it in the beginning. It is something that is brought up multiple times throughout the book. It's not just like I have ADHD, I have dyslexia. It's something that's a part of who the character is. It's not just like I said they have this and they have it. It's actually represented in the book of the different characteristics that instead of just being like a label, it's shown in the book, which I think is better than just saying these are things that they have. We're not going to talk about them anymore.
Right. And then just brush past it like it doesn't affect their day-to-day lives. Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. And I know he was also a teacher. I read that.
Yes, he was a teacher. He taught English and history at public and private middle schools.
There's you and me. You're into history and I'm into English.
Yes.
Maybe you're into both. You're like, don't label me, but...
No, I'm definitely more into history than English.
This is a good part. I did want to talk a little bit about your podcast. Do you want to share about that?
Yes. So I have a history podcast. It's called It's a History Podcast because I couldn't think of literally anything else to call it. And I was calling it that. That was like my, I don't know, it was like the placeholder name. And then the placeholder name became the actual name. But I've got about 30 episodes out now. And I've gone through I've found my little niche. American history and a little bit of women's history tends to be what I find myself falling into. Some things I've looked in, like the Louisiana Purchase, surprisingly, some of the most popular things people like to listen about is the Louisiana Purchase episodes I did. I didn't think when I was doing them that we were that interested in the Louisiana Purchase, but We are interested in the Louisiana Purchase.
Yeah, you make it fun, and I feel like your episodes, they're quick. So someone who wants to know something about it, you can jump in and jump out. It's like a car ride, and you get out of the car and you've learned something new.
Yes, I try to keep them within that 20, 25, maybe 30 minutes. The Mary Shelley episodes I did, those are the longest episodes I've done, and I probably could have made it into more parts. But I was like, 3 parts, I think, is probably the maximum number of parts I want to do here.
What got you into history?
I've always really liked history. In school, it was one of my favorite subjects that I joked about when I was like in school. Like, oh, I'm just going to be, a crazy history teacher. That's what I'm going to be. And then I went to college, and I originally went to school with the intention of becoming a history teacher. But then I did some experience in the classroom, and I was like, I don't think the teaching part is for me. But I still liked the history, and I still liked telling people about history. So I had the thought on the back of my head, and I graduated college December 2020. So it was like peak COVID. And I started listening to history podcasts more during that time. And I was just having history information poured into my brain at all points of the day. And then I had the idea to do a history podcast. And now I'm just reading the things that I like to read and telling the internet about it. And whoever wants to listen can listen. Join my little party over there.
Yeah. How do you research for your episodes?
So I usually have I like to research things that I have maybe a little bit of prior knowledge on. So I'm not going in completely blind. But I do some, usually books. I've gotten into the Libby app. Shout out Libby.
Yay! Shout out Libby.
Because I have the Kindle app on my phone, and you can highlight on the ebooks in the Kindle app, and it makes it so much easier to go read through, do some highlighting, and then go through again, write my script. And I'm like, okay, perfect. I have it all right here. I usually set my phone up on my laptop, and I'm just like typing the notes, going through and the important little information. But it's usually through a book. I use some online resources, but I'm trying to get more of my information from books, articles, that kind of source.
You're like warming my library heart with that. So
yes, I have a newfound love for Libby, and I just recently got into audiobooks. Which I probably should have gotten into them sooner, because I've been listening to podcasts. Like, I always have something in my ear, like for probably like the last 7 years now. I've had podcasts going, and I feel like it should be a more easy step into audiobooks. I can't do fantasy books yet as audiobooks. I can do the nonfiction ones, but the fantasy books, I have a hard time focusing for some reason. I'm not sure what's going on there, but the nonfiction ones, because it's just like not a more monotone podcast, but it's a more like structured information type of thing. But the fantasy ones, I have a hard time with a different voice in my head, like reading it, and it's not me. I don't know if that makes any sense.
The narrator is so important too when you're doing audio, for sure. I love that. And I guess that kind of leads me into a question about going back to Percy a little bit. It's a fantasy series. Do you read mostly fantasy? Did this launch your fantasy obsession? What do you read normally?
So normally it is fantasy, but I'm not sure what the genre is called, but it's just like slice of life books. Like I just recently read like Tomorrow, like something like that. That's just like a real life, this could happen to anybody type thing.
Yes. I loved Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow. That's like a heartbreaker.
Yes.
Couldn't put it down. Yeah, we're reading it again this year. Or I read it already, but my book club's doing it at the end of this year. So I'm looking forward to that.
Yes. No, I did enjoy that one. That one I picked up, and I had a hard time putting it down when I had to go do something. I'm like, oh, but I just want to keep reading.
I know. Yes. I know. I love books about relationships too. Not just romantic relationships, but kind of understanding like the flow of life and And so let's go into fantasy a little bit. Any fantasy that you like recently?
So I am currently in the midst of a Fourth Wing obsession right now.
I feel like I'm gasping this whole episode.
So I haven't read the third one yet. I have it in my possession. I have it. It's sitting on my chair. Me
Okay.
and one of my close friends, we're doing a buddy read tomorrow where we're just going to sit in her apartment and just read the whole day. Yes, no, I like devoured Fourth Wing and then Iron Flame, and all of the content I've been being shown like on Instagram is just all Fourth Wing related. I'm like, I have to read this other book. But that one it feels more like on the same page as like the Hunger Games and Divergent type of books that I read, and less like the fairy side of fantasy and more the dragon side of fantasy. But I started reading ACOTAR just a couple of days ago. I haven't finished the first book yet, so I'm in the middle of that one. But that is where I'm at in my fantasy thing that I've got.
Yeah, if the listener, anyone's listening right now, this Onyx Storm was released this week. So it's been the Onyx Storm blitz for everyone.
Yes.
So Madison has got her finger on the pulse.
This is like one of the first, honestly, I can say this is probably the first time I've been like in the middle of a book series being released. And the first time was when the Heroes of Olympus books were being released. When those books were being released, the first one came out, I read it. The second one came out, I reread the first one. And then for every other release, I reread the whole series before the next book came out. I haven't done that for Fourth Wing yet, but since there's going to be some time between this book and the next one, because I believe Rebecca Yarros just hasn't, I don't think she started writing the fourth one yet, so there will be some time in between.
Yeah. Although I've heard that she's plotted the whole series.
Yes, I did hear that as well. And I'm interested to see when everything is said and done and all the books are out, to read it from the beginning again and see all of the little Easter eggs that she's left. Because she is, even just between the first and the second book, she is very masterful at her little Easter egg dropping.
I know. I love her so much. Not to get too off track a little bit, but I just find her, I'm doing my thing and people love it, and I don't know. I feel like she's just really embraced who she is, and
she's really having her moment right now. I read other books of hers before this, like that. I didn't even know that she wrote Fourth Wing. I think it was called In the Likely Event. It's a romance that she wrote because she writes a lot of contemporary romances. So I've read a few of those, and then I was like, oh wait, I know this author's name for this fantasy series. Like, this is not the same as the other books I've read from her.
So yes, good, very good for her. And then just coming back real quick to Percy Jackson, who today would you, if they're listening out there, who would you recommend this story for?
I would honestly, if you've never read Percy Jackson, I think this is one of the book series that it was very popular, but I feel like it wasn't at the same level as Harry Potter, The Hunger Games, Divergent. It kind of was just on that second tier. But I definitely think this is a top tier book that if you've never read it, I think you would have a good time. And if you maybe have maybe a non-reader that is a little apprehensive to reading as they get into like middle school, I would maybe give this book to them. It's very action-packed right from the start. So there's not like a long kind of getting into it. You start reading it and you're into it. That's something maybe that you struggle with, is getting into books. This is also a great series to get into any type of fantasy. It's not very highbrow fantasy, so you can dip your toes into the fantasy world and see if that's something that you enjoy reading.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. And I did want to give you just a sec. Are there any things we can see coming up on the podcast or anything else that you would like to shout out right now for yourself?
I guess I'll just shout out my podcast again. It's called It's a History Podcast. It's everywhere you can get podcasts. We talked about a little bit. I just did a 3-part series on Mary Shelley and her entourage. Her and her group were very intermingled. Very difficult to separate them. It was kind of Mary Shelley and friends. And then the week of Valentine's Day, I am doing a history of romance novels episode. I feel like that would be interesting to the listeners of this podcast.
Yes. Oh yeah, it would be perfect. I can't wait. I love romance novels. So and I think I've got to love romantasy, romance, all of it.
Yes. Especially since romantasy seems to be having a moment right now. I think this is the perfect time to take a deep dive and get into maybe the Fabio of it all. I don't know. We'll see where it takes me.
I love that. Save it for your pod.
Yes.
The Fabio of it all. Oh my gosh. Madison, this has been a blast. And thank you so much for coming on, talking about Percy Jackson with us and sharing everything else, your love of history. Hope you had a good time. And the Blue Hawaii.
Yes. Yes, thank you for having me. I've enjoyed this.
Good. I'm good. This has been so much fun. Enjoy the rest of your night.
Yes, you too.
Thank you. All right.
Thank you for spending some time with me and my guest for an episode of Drinks in the Library. For more information about the show, you can find us on Instagram at Drinks in the Library, on the World Wide Web, drinksinthelibrary.com, or shoot me an email at drinkspod@gmail.com. Until next time, cheers.